Hello and welcome to The Conversation. I'm Shannon Taylor, and we have a very unusual New Year's treat for everybody out in our audience today. First of all, a happy and a healthy New Year to all those who survived into the new year 2007. 2006 was a roller coaster. We lost some milestones of personages, and we have survived wars and cataclysms, and we are now on the edge of two funerals. There is the funeral of President Gerald Ford and the funeral of James Brown. James Brown, the godfather of soul. As this is the conversation for Blacks and Jews in Conversation, and not just Blacks and Jews in Conversation, and I'm the executive director, I'm taking personal privilege and giving a personal note. I'm not speaking for the organization, I'm speaking for myself. And by the way, behind me is David Berger, and that's his daughter Lucy, and they will be on very shortly as a New Year's treat. Entrepreneur and computer maven, software creator, and our website originator. But before we get to that, I must comment on these funerals. James Brown will dearly be missed. His music is of course not just soul, it's inspiration, it's creativity. He was a peacemaker and a healer, not only through his music but through his inspiration. Both he and President Ford started out as loners. President Ford was an abandoned child and gravitated towards his adopted father, and James Brown came from abject poverty and a complete lack of education. And they went separate ways. President Ford, when he became president, started out with three statements. The first was that we need $1 billion to stay in Vietnam, which the Congress politely listened to and rejected. The second was that we're going to keep Henry Kissinger, and I do not have a high opinion of him whatsoever. And then we were going to reassess our relationship with Israel. Those were his words. And whether or not Israel is indeed worthy of being a friend of the United States. This was after Israel was attacked on her holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, by her Arab Muslim neighbors, and the troops were kept in the field for months and months by Henry Kissinger, and that was after they managed, after a month or more of fighting, to completely turn the tables on the invading armies who had attacked with surprise on Yom Kippur and were completely surrounded. And instead of gaining Israel the victory that was her right, Henry Kissinger and President Ford were forcing the armies and the populace of Israel to endure economic hardships and into a truce that was forcing Israel to give in to the demands of the conquered invading armies. Also, President Ford was not an environmentalist, contrary to Ted Stevens' comments at the funeral. It was the Congress who protected the estuaries of Alaska, and President Ford meekly signed on. It was President Nixon who was the environmentalist, if you're going to consider Ford an environmentalist. So between the two, I'll attend the funeral of James Brown. I, of course, grieve for the family of President Ford, but I regard President Ford's presidency as something that Jimmy Carter saved us from. Even though I'm no fan of Jimmy Carter, one of the great things he did was to defeat President Ford and to go on and save our environment, however much of disappointment he's been in Middle East politics ever since. And now we're going to turn to our guest and to the new year, and for this we turn to Blacks and Jews in Conversation. And when we were lost, when we did not have a website, which we now do, njbjc.org, I found David and Melissa Berger. And David, I'm now going to turn to you to advise. First of all, give us your background. I know that you were at Harvard Medical School and you decided medicine wasn't for you, and the computers and softwares were, and you got associated with the Princeton Review, and you designed certain software that was successful, and this led to further creativity and further associations, and eventually you came to us, thank heavens, and you're on to bigger and better things. Give us this background, and welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Shannon. My specialty My specialty is taking information, whether it's text, words, video, and bringing it to the computer in a way that people will be able to see in a more interactive way. With NJBC, what we did was we went through and took many of the images and the articles that existed in static form and not many people got to see, and we worked to scan the photos. We worked to get the text into the computer, and then we were able to fairly simply get it up onto a website so that anyone could view the information. In addition, it also allowed people to be able to update the information, so the site stays current. And if you have limited resources, for example, the ability to get word out to people about certain events, it's good to have the website because people can always come to it and see the most recent information.
For those in our viewing audience who have yet to create a website, who would like to form an organization such as ours or differently, or perhaps come and visit MNN and perhaps try and get a talk show or go out and get a community-based organization, or like ours, link up with seemingly disparate groups and seek common ground, obviously the website is the first means of communication. Is it that difficult to create? What are the first tools that you need? Must you have an in-depth knowledge of computer technology, or are there lesser means at hand that will enable you to proceed forward?
Actually, it's fairly easy to create a website. My recommendation would be to go to Yahoo, and there are tools there that will let you create your own website, register a domain name, and they have all of the tools that if you can basically type text into a computer and shoot pictures with a digital camera and upload, you can do a very nice website. But what's getting even more popular than websites per se are blogs. And again, there are very many programs like Blogger.com where you can go get an account and just start typing and be able to get your opinion out to millions of people with almost no effort.
That is the most ridiculous sounding name I've ever heard, a blog. It sounds like somebody evaporated on the sidewalk and left a little smudge there. How did you come up with something called a blog? And how come that doesn't turn off people when you certainly turned off me? And why would I ever want to go? We don't have a blog, David. Is that something that I should seek?
Shannon, you most definitely should do a blog. People would be very interested in reading that. A blog stands for weblog. So it's a contraction, and there are vlogs, which are video logs, which are getting more common as people share the video that they're shooting. And I think a blog would be something perfect for you. It really represents a shift where people are looking at static information. Even your website, even if someone updates it once a week, once a month, there isn't up to the moment information, whereas if you had a blog every day, if you had a new thought, for example, on Ford's funeral, you could go in and just type some information, and there are millions of people out there who are reading these every day, so people can get information that's really up to the second accurate.
Tell me about your background. How do you leave medical school and go into computers? Your father is a doctor, and a very savvy one. We have the opportunity to meet him from time to time, very current. Now, was he happy when you left medical school to go into computers? He may be happy now, but at the time, what did he think and what did you think?
Well, actually, Shannon, I didn't even quite make medical school. I took the medical college admissions test. I was filling out the applications, answering questions like what would make you a good doctor, and I decided that I probably wouldn't make a very good doctor and was much more interested in the 22 science classes that I took and how we were using the computers in the science classes to really change the way we were learning.
And what drew you towards computers? As I ran the other way, what drew you in?
Well, I actually went to college in '87, which is right when the computer was introduced. And like most students then, I was using a computer mostly just to do word processing at the start, and it's 10 times easier to write your papers. You could actually leave a major paper till the night before. And because of the ability to quickly edit and change things, it really made my life much easier, and this kind of extended into other areas of my study.
Now, I can't help but notice that with Lucy, how old is Lucy, by the way?
Lucy is 3.5.
That you are teaching Lucy even before 3.5 on the computer, and you're introducing her to the computer. And I think of Steve Irwin, who when he was presented with a newfound son or daughter, I forget which, introduced the child to crocodiles and alligators, and said that the younger the child is, the more imprinted on the mind is what the child will learn. And I imagine that's your philosophy with computers. Do you actually believe that Lucy is grasping what you are trying to imprint on her mind with regard to computer processing and operation?
Absolutely. The great thing about the computer is that it adapts to your level. So it's very important if someone Lucy's age, really at any age, is using a computer, that the software is well written. But Lucy, for example, loves some software that Disney has. And the great thing about the software is it has a series of different puzzles with different characters that she likes. And the key to it is every time she finishes a given puzzle or a given level, it gives very positive feedback, which she likes. And then it gets more difficult the next time. And it remembers the student, it remembers Lucy, so that when she comes back, it knows exactly what to give her and how to keep it interesting.
I wish I could ask Lucy what she thinks of the computer, but I think she's too camera shy at this point. We're going to have to wait for a later age. And I'd like to know, what about all those games that are out there? I know that you turned this on to Visualize, and I'm sure that the computer technology has been an inspiration for these kind of games. Can Lucy play Visualize, or that requires an imagination to see designs on blocks and put these designs together and pair them up and say what they would come up to? You're a wizard at all these things. You're like you are with Scrabble, where you're a master. Does the computer help develop the facility, or is it independent?
Well, the advantage of the computer is that it's a little bit easier to use. Oddly enough, we do puzzles very often together, and the hardest part about some of the puzzles we do is actually getting the pieces to snap together when there's not a perfect fit. Whereas when she does puzzles on the Disney site, for example, she's able to use the mouse, and when she drags the two pieces of the puzzle close together, they just snap together. So she's most definitely able to do visual puzzles on the computer. But just because we really focus on the computer in education doesn't mean that that's the only way. There's a game called Da Vinci's Challenge, which is similar to Go or chess in some ways, where you make different patterns and you race to get the patterns done. And the first time we showed it to Lucy, she picked up one of the cards and was able to pick up the pieces and make the pattern. So it's one of her favorite games.
Now, Lucy has a mother, Melissa, and an aunt, and the aunt is from California, and these two people in her growing up, do they join with you in the computer education and programming, or do they have my view of this and shy away from it?
All three of us actually use the computer with Lucy, and in different ways. Actually, my wife Melissa spends more time with Lucy on the various sites playing games with her. Although one thing that we have found is that there is a lack of good software for the kids. There's good software out there, but there's not quite enough. And Melissa's actually suggested that as Lucy is growing older and we find that there are different things we want to teach her, that I should actually program software for her.
Miranda has a California background here. Now, in California, you can't convince me that they regard the computer as a means of what we use, communication to develop high-intensity education programming, to bring together disparate groups so that we can advance, removing the artificial boundaries that separate ourselves and to charting courses for the future that will bring us together. I believe in California, the computers are only used for Silicon Valley and for technology, for movies and so on and so forth. But you travel there often. What is your take on it?
Actually, I disagree. We're actually attempting an experiment where we're homeschooling Lucy, at least for now. And one of the best online learning programs that exists was developed at Stanford. As Lucy's math skills get a little bit better, her primary learning in math very well may be from Stanford professors over the computer. So I think that primarily the movie industry and other things dominate. But California is such a big state; there's plenty of good stuff being done.
Your wife Melissa is an accomplished dancer and singer, and actually the computer has developed the ability to have music and dance charts incorporated into its features, which has led to all kinds of litigation. Are you familiar with all of this? And do you actually regard the synthetic music and dance you can find in the computer as a fitting substitute for the real thing?
My ear is not as good as my wife's, so to me the iPod and the downloadable music is really great. The technology is getting better all of the time, so it's getting to the point where only someone with an incredibly good ear can really tell the difference, especially if you use high quality MP3s. And it's getting the same way with video too. Pretty soon you'll be downloading all of your movies off the computer and watching them on TV, and the quality will be much better than what you're used to now.
For those of you still not familiar with the enhancement of a website, I used to go around with multiple Xerox packets of all our press from the New York Times, the Daily News, the New York Post, ABC, CBS, Xeroxing and Xeroxing and Xeroxing for the various supporters who had donated their time and their equipment with interns from all over, and carrying and schlepping and marching with all of our cadre of volunteers, and all the universities across the country with volumes and releases, and getting all kinds of backaches from all of this. Now, with a website, for the last several years, I simply have a card. The card says the website on it, and you can look on the website, and there you are. All of this is there. Now, at the same time, no website can make available the original articles of these newspapers and magazines and television past a certain period of time. Plus, you have to purchase from the original sources certain pages that we could easily hand out without having to have people purchase them. Those are inherent limitations. Is there a way around those limitations on a website?
Well, a lot of the stuff that you're Xeroxing might technically, it may technically not be completely kosher with copyright law to be copying them anyway. So if you're willing to go around and Xerox and hand out, considering it fair use, you can probably still put the articles up on a website and kind of treat it the same way. In terms of not having access to the original stuff, it's actually tied into the same argument with the music. People are actually initially were very afraid of distributing stuff for free over the internet and wondering where the money is coming from, and they're finding alternate sources now. So I think you'll find that putting up, for example, New York Times articles will become easier and easier without having to pay for it.
We had obtained the permission to hand out Xeroxes. I never sought permission regarding the website because I didn't know about those restrictions. And after a certain period of time, you lose on these papers' own websites certain years. Certain years are no longer carried. How do you preserve those years in the archives on another means, so that 10 years after an article has appeared, you can still refer somebody to it, regardless of whether someone thinks it's current or not?
Well, one of the great advantages of being on a website or being on the internet is that you can digitally store things. For example, PDF documents are a common way of sharing text between people on a computer. So if there are articles that you want to link to, it's very easy to convert them into PDF for reuse. And even if the Times, for example, no longer makes the articles available, as long as you have permission to use it, you can easily just post the PDFs yourself. And the same thing goes for just straight text or web HTML web pages, digital images, anything like that.
So tell us about your progress through the design process. Tell us what you first started out with creating, and again with the Princeton Review, and what you sold, and what was the next step, and because we have on the audiences for these stations would-be entrepreneurs, not yet as successful as yourself, but anticipating that, and we of course encourage that. We encourage people in this wonderful country of ours in the bright new year that the future is ahead of them, and that they have limitless horizons given good health and good faith and the law-abiding citizenry and perhaps good cheer from family and good news, that they can yet have a good education, or even without a good education, that they can go ahead and progress in business. So tell me, what was your saga?
Well, I was pre-med at Harvard and decided not to go to medical school, but I saw all of the other students stressing out about the medical college admissions test. And the good test materials were few and far between and very expensive. So I ended up hiring a bunch of graduates and undergraduates, and we wrote our own computer-based review, which we ended up licensing to the Princeton Review, and because of some lucky awards we won and reviews in the early days, we were able to sell and do fairly well with that. I continued producing products for the Princeton Review, and as they started to bring the computer into test prep, I did a lot of their early products and eventually took a job as head of technology for their software division and worked with them until they sold the company. I then helped found a tutoring website that the Princeton Review was one of the founders of, and this was in the heyday of the internet and the dot-com boom, and we basically had the idea of doing online tutoring where you would be able to say, gee, I'm having trouble with mechanics and physics, let me see if there's a tutor online now, and be able to chat with them and share a whiteboard and pay $20 an hour or whatever and get immediate help. We raised about $15 million. We had a very good product. The dot-com bubble burst, and we found that while it was a good product, people weren't quite used to paying yet for this sort of thing. So I moved on to another industry and worked with some companies in the pharmaceutical marketing area, doing education on drugs before they received FDA approval was one of the main areas we were focusing on. And I worked with a particular gentleman for a couple of years at a few different companies, and we decided that we were a little bit tired of making money for other people, so we founded our own company a few years ago. And I worked with that company for a few years and have recently left, and I'm looking for some new opportunities.
We are a not-for-profit and a non-commercial, as is the station. So to the extent that we are not-for-profit, non-commercial, do you have a website that you can give out for people who want to contact you for information or for possible joint projects or possible future endeavors?
Well, actually, right now I'm extremely busy and I'm not available for work. But my suggestion, if you're looking for a technologist in the New York area, is Craigslist, which is Craigslist.org. Started, I believe, in San Francisco. It started as a simple kind of classified ads on the web, and people were using it for everything from finding apartments to finding used bicycles, and it's really expanded a lot. It's available in most of the major cities now, and it used to be free. Now it costs a little bit of money for doing a posting, but if you needed pretty much anything in any of the major cities for $15, you can post post an ad if you needed someone to help build a website. If you posted a listing to Craigslist, within 2 or 3 hours, you'll have 100 emails offering services to you.
What is it like working in this miserable city where everything is so crowded and everything is so expensive and everything is so competitive? Do you find it conducive to productivity? Do you prefer California, or you truly are a New Yorker who finds this the greatest place on earth?
Well, I grew up in New York City, spent my college years and afterwards in Boston, and moved to San Francisco during the dot-com boom. And New York, I think, is great when you have money. And if you don't have money, it's not so great. So depending on whether I was jobless because of the dot-com bust or doing really well, kind of goes as how much I like New York. It's too expensive to have a car, which I didn't mind at first with my daughter. It's a little bit easier to have a car. And I'm just really scared owning an apartment in New York, because if the real estate bursts, don't want to be left with a mortgage. So I'm, I have mixed feelings. I think Boston was the best mix.
What's it like being a young father? As that cheerful and encouraging, especially to an entrepreneur?
Being a young father is the best thing I've done. In terms of being an entrepreneur, it was a very good thing that I was already well established before I had children, because I used to work 80 plus hours a week and would work late into the night and incredibly hard, and often from home. And that's a little bit difficult, especially in New York, where a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment is pretty much all any normal person can afford.
I want to thank David Berger and Lucy, and Melissa and Miranda for being wonderful friends of Blacks and Jews in Conversation, which expanded to not just Blacks and Jews in Conversation, for their wonderful outlook on the new year. And given that, any last words for our audience and for the future, for the coming year, and any projections for the future?
I would basically say that, as you were alluding to before, the computer really opens up new avenues of business and entrepreneurship, and really pursue your interests. Look at what's out there available on the internet in whatever you're interested in, and if you see a lack, it's an opportunity to create a new company, a new business, and really do what you want to be doing.
Thank you again. You were there when we had no one else. I always will count on you.